Good morning and welcome to Shattering Myths. This program is devoted to those who know that the world's political, religious, media, military, and economic institutions are causing the problems that are plaguing our world, and therefore repopulating them with people of different views is not going to be the solution. Our mission, therefore, is to look behind the headlines to know who is perpetrating the crimes that over the course of the next 15 years will wreak havoc on our world. And as a result, in our second hour, we're going to use evidence and reason to explore the Torah, because its covenant provides the only reliable escape. Our phone number, if you'd like to participate in this discussion, it's toll-free. It's 877-300-7645. Boy, as I look back now at about 6 years ago, and we had a choice in the United States of America between John McCain, the senator from Arizona that has never seen a possibility for war that he did not want to embrace, and Barack Hussein Obama, who now twice has nearly engaged this nation in world war. And you wonder why I say that we ought not choose between the lesser of two evils. Think of the choice that existed 6 years ago. Well, this story is why I'm reporting this. China says one of its warships encountered a U.S. vessel, confirming U.S. reports of a near collision in the South China Sea. The U.S. said its guided missile cruiser USS Cowpens was forced to take evasive action as the two ships neared each other on the 5th of December. It had been described as the most serious Sino-U.S. confrontation in the South China Sea since 2009. The U.S. said its ship was operating in international waters. No, the United States was there to provoke China. It was there to provoke China. This happened in the South China Sea. The United States has decided that the international community's largest lender to the United States, the country that manufactures components for virtually every product we use in America, is to be provoked. The world's largest manufacturing nation is to be provoked. So this president, just as he wants to provoke Russia by sending missiles over them, their ships into Syria, sent American warships into the South China Sea, not just to provoke the Chinese, but to directly provoke its aircraft carrier.
Is this a bullying tactic? Because this makes no sense to me. If they stop buying worthless paper, what good does that do us?
Well, actually,
I don't get this strategy at all. Okay. I don't understand this.
Let me finish the story, and then I will explain what you're talking about here.
Yeah.
The Chinese say that the United States ship had been purposefully harassing China's new aircraft carrier, the Liaoning, as it carried out drills. That's what we were there to do. And they finally got tired of it and said, go away. And so, yes, we were there to provoke the Chinese. Now, why does Obama want to provoke the Chinese? Because he has been blunt, saying that he is directing all American military resources to reevaluate and recalibrate its foe. And he says that he has deliberately set up bases now in Australia and increased the U.S. military presence in the Pacific, pointing all available U.S. military resources against China, because he says that is our foe. So he is deliberately trying to say Islam, which is the foe that is responsible for 100% of the terrorist acts against America and Americans and against allies around the world, that he doesn't want them to be his foe because he is very sympathetic to Islam. So he's saying, okay, we're going to redeploy so that China becomes our foe. And he is provoking China into war, just as he was trying to provoke Russia into war. These are wars we cannot.
This is an insane proposition.
These are wars we cannot win. These are wars which will leave millions, if not tens or hundreds of millions of people dead.
So I want to make this. So we moved GM to China.
Right.
We used American taxpayers' money to do that.
And we gave Chrysler to Italy. And
then we closed down coal plants, and then the coal ends up over there where they're opening up a new plant every day. And today we've closed one down. The EPA, the clean coal plant, couldn't go. I guess they don't want any energy left in the United States, is what it looks like.
That's correct. We're not going to build the Keystone Pipeline, and the United States built both the Russian and the Chinese pipelines from the Caspian Sea to make certain that China and Russia would continue to be allies of Iran.
Right.
Yeah, that's the position we put ourselves in.
Attacking China.
Right.
Who in the hell is running this operation, and to what
That's my point. That's my point. When you have someone like McCain who wants us to go to war on behalf of fundamentalist Islamic terrorists, he did it in Libya, and look what it did for us there. He wants to side with the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. He wants to side with the Mujahideen, the jihadists in Syria, and now he wants Americans to go stand with the Ukrainians against the Russians. And then you have this idiot for president that wants to, not only taunt the Russians and Chinese, but if Putin hadn't come up with a plan to blow out the fuse that Obama had lit with his red line and his desire to bomb Syria, we right now would be involved in World War III. That's how irresponsible this man is.
Meanwhile, they're giving him peace prizes, of course, but I'm trying to figure out...
Well, that's because the Nobel Association made their fortune by providing dynamite and explosives for the world's militaries.
No, I understand who Nobel was, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out what in the hell purpose, other than causing World War III, this could be about.
Well, one is that it would cause World War III, which would dramatically, dramatically change the rate to which America is becoming a totalitarian state. We would
so this is out of chaos comes control.
Right, total control. That's one. And number two is he wants to reposition America's animosity from being against Islam to being against the Chinese.
Well, now, it's already against. He's repositioned it already.
Right. But the problem is the Chinese,
the American public now.
The Chinese are not our enemy. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in China. A lot of time in China. I've done business with many, many hundreds of Chinese, and I have had discussions with thousands of Chinese. The Chinese are not our enemy. I have also spent a lot of time in Russia. The Russians are not our enemy. The notion that the Russians and the Chinese are our enemy is a pure myth by the U.S. government for the express purpose of justifying the NSA, the CIA, the NGIC, the military intelligence operations. It is a ruse for keeping
the military-industrial complex itself. I mean, just the building
and for depriving Americans of their freedoms and for robbing them of their money. That is, all of that is to create this boogeyman out there that the government needs to protect you from. It is absolutely a lie. Now, you mentioned something that is interesting. I at one time would have thought that the last thing anyone in their right mind would do would be to thumb their nose at and tweak the nose of someone who is responsible for funding your bankrupt country. And that China is the largest international source of T-bills. But the U.S. government and the Federal Reserve figured out a way to fund the government through a shell game, through illusion, through myth, that doesn't actually require anyone to buy its T-bills. You see, the problem with our T-bills is that we're bankrupt. China knows we're bankrupt. China knows that it would be insane for them to buy more Treasury bills at de minimis interest rates, which they're artificially low right now, and they know that they can't. It'd be stupid for them to buy more Treasury bills at these rates. But the United States can't raise the rates to reflect the true risk associated with loaning money to a bankrupt nation. And so
nobody will buy them.
Well, because at that point, if they raise the rates, then rather than adding $1 trillion to our deficit every year, we would add $2 trillion to our deficit every year. We would go bankrupt all the more quickly. But even worse, when you're doubling your deficit each year, the gap between what you receive and what you spend every year, now you have to fund twice as much debt each year. You have to service twice as much debt each year, and we can't service the debt that we have now. And so quantitative easing by the Federal Reserve was designed to create the illusion of money out of nothing, and to have this illusionary money, this flip of a switch to create another decimal point in the money supply, to have this artificial money buy the Treasury bills. So that the Fed now is the largest holder of Treasury bills, even though they didn't actually supply any money to buy them. And so with the Fed filling the role of buying our Treasury bills with imaginary money, you don't need real investors. And so you service your debt by simply printing more money. But when you go and do that, eventually the world says, I don't want any part of you anymore. Your currency can't be an international reserve currency. The illusion that your money has value will eventually be destroyed under these circumstances. And so that's the reason why the United States can be confrontational with China now, where before quantitative easing we could not be. Now that doesn't mean we should be, but it at least explains why he can be provocative with China, even though China is the largest holder of U.S. Treasuries.
I think these guys are they feel like they're on the cusp of being caught for all their criminality.
Mm-hmm.
And
they are. Well, look at Obama. He wiretaps the Associated Press. He deliberately lies about Benghazi, which is a catastrophic lie, so that rather than blaming Benghazi on our support of the Mujahideen in Libya and the fact that it was Ansar Sharia, Friends of Sharia law, fundamentalist Muslims, that killed our ambassador with weapons we had provided, he blamed a fundamentalist Christian. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. Yes, I know it's a small story amongst so many that are in the news, but this notion that the United States deliberately, and this has to go all the way to the President of the United States, made a decision that they would not only send bombers through China's air defense identification zone, which is completely hypocritical because the United States has a air defense identification zone that is more than twice the width of China's, and probably 20 times the length of China's, and to say that we can have one but you can't have one is moronic, totally and completely hypocritical. But now over a couple of rocks, we're going to send American Navy vessels to harass China's new aircraft carrier. And in the process, we nearly have a open ocean collision between the two naval vessels. Far lesser things have prompted war. If you recall, there was this lie that said that in the Gulf of Tonkin, that North Vietnamese patrol boats fired on a U.S. Warship, and that we used that as justification for sending 60,000 Americans to their death, making Vietnam a worse place.
Countless others injured.
Yeah, and of course it didn't happen. The whole incident was a lie, but we were there in their waters to be provocative, just as we were there in China to be provocative. So those who think that, just because you're there to be provocative doesn't mean that this act would lead to war Look what happened in Vietnam. Look what happened in World War.
My understanding, that was about a couple of different things. One was to see, and you hear about the famed Phoenix, project, but most people really don't know what Phoenix was. And what that was about was to see if you could, put 1 million people in prison without giving them a day in court.
Yeah.
And that's what it was about, and that was part of the experiment of Vietnam, by the way, and that's what happened.
But the Gulf of Tonkin incident never occurred. Lyndon Johnson and McNamara on the phone. The recording is at the University of Virginia. You can Google it and listen to it. They're talking about that the very act that they used to justify the Vietnam War was a lie, and that they knew it was a lie after only a few thousand Americans had died, but because LBJ wanted to save face and didn't want to be branded a president who lost a war and retreated in shame since JFK had established American troops there. We continued to support that war, and 60,000 Americans died and millions of Vietnamese based on a lie. The Lusitania sinking, which justified America's intervention in World War I, was a setup especially to cause Americans to think that they needed to do their patriotic duty and go off to war. The ship was deliberately equipped with military hardware and was deliberately sent into harm's way, with the Germans posting ads in America saying, don't do this, don't board this ship. It is a direct violation of the international treaties. And this is a warship carrying munitions, and America has been a neutral party. Don't do this because we're going to sink it. And, of course, they slowed the Lusitania to half speed. They took it right into where they knew there were U-boats, and it was sunk. And then we lied about the whole premise of it and called the Germans dastardly for killing American civilians. Justified war.
That makes Woodrow Wilson a war criminal too.
Right. Spanish-American War. We arranged the sinking of the Maine to justify going to war against the Spanish. So don't think for a moment that these kinds of things don't lead to wars. They do. You look at Iraq. We entered Iraq based on a lie upon the yellow cake uranium purchase and the weapons of mass destruction. We entered Afghanistan even based on a lie that the Afghanis were somehow responsible for 9/11. It is just an avalanche of lies and of stupid miscalculations that get America and the rest of the world into these horrible conflicts. And this guy, in the last 6 months, has come within a whisper of starting a war with the Russians and another with the Chinese.
I just don't know that these are miscalculations. I think they are calculated to cause a war. I mean, that's the only thing I can think.
We can't win a war with either. We can't win a war with either country. And let me explain why we can't win a war with either country. Both countries have torpedoes in huge quantities that are specifically designed to operate. They use hydrogen peroxide. They operate at very high speeds. And they are designed to blow up beneath the keels of our aircraft carriers. There is no way to stop them. And when they blow up, they create this water pocket underneath the aircraft carrier. It breaks the keel. I mean, it's within 30 seconds, 5,000 men are dead. And every one of our aircraft carriers would be destroyed. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. Wars are horrible things. Thomas Jefferson, and we spent a lot of time in previous shows citing his overt animosity towards an established military, the very thing that, not only does the United States have an established military, which was what Jefferson considered was the greatest single threat to the nation's survival and the nation's freedoms, was having a standing military. But not only does the nation have one, it's larger than the rest of the world's militaries combined. But even worse than that, it's provocative. We are the world's most provocative military. I was listening, and it just tore my heart out to have the general over at the NSA speak of Snowden as if he was a murderer, and saying, he's killed 10 of the 50 victims that he's taken hostage, and therefore we can't give him amnesty if he releases the other 40. When I realized that the United States, we are the most murderous nation. Yes, I understand there's the civil war going on in Syria, but we're supplying half the weapons for that war. I understand that Libya is a hellhole of jihadists, but we supplied their weapons. There is no other nation on earth that you can say has invaded multiple countries over the last 20 years, but we have. There's no other country that you can say routinely violates other people's sovereignty in their airspace to use drones to kill thousands of civilians. But we do. We're the most murderous country on earth. And so here's the head of the NSA.
In my head. I'm sorry, I wasn't aware of all this morning, and you kind of blindsided me with it. I wasn't up to speed, and I'm still not probably, but I'm shaking my head. This is blatant. I mean, this is blatant aggression.
It is
against the country. This would cause thousands and thousands and thousands of deaths.
Right.
It would maybe go nuclear.
I don't know. It's a war we cannot win. That we cannot fight. America cannot fight the Chinese or the Russians, because the Chinese and Russians have torpedoes specifically designed to take out all of our aircraft carriers. And the moment our aircraft carriers are gone, we cannot project a force. And so now we're left with B-52 bombers, and both Russia and China have very sophisticated air defense mechanisms. So now what are you left with? Are you going to shoot cruise missiles out of submarines and have them be conventionally armed, so that every time you take out a building, you spent $3 million every time you fire one? Or are you going to go nuclear and destroy the entire country and most of the northern hemisphere?
I'm just wondering if they're so hard up for a war that they're willing to just destroy the country in order to get away with all the theft.
Yeah, well, we cannot. It is impossible. There is no scenario as to which the United States can engage in a war with either China and Russia and prevail. Now, that's not to say that our military isn't vastly superior to both China and Russia. It is, in fact, vastly superior to both of them combined. But that does not mean that there is a scenario where we could prevail against either in a war. We can no more occupy either country than the man on the moon. We can't even project a force to either country. We could not invade either country. So what are we going to do? We're just going to bomb them?
This is very bizarre, Yada. Very, very. This is so off the charts.
Well, I don't think it's quite as off the charts as Obama lying about what happened in Syria relative to the poison gas.
But I would expect that.
The sarin gas. And then him saying that because he was absolutely certain that Assad had personally authorized the use of sarin gas against his people, that the United States needed to engage in that war and start dropping bombs. That was actually, particularly with Russian warships between us and our ships, that was actually infinitely more suicidal than us provoking the Chinese aircraft carrier. And the Chinese, by the way, only have one aircraft carrier. And this aircraft carrier is in their waters, and we are provoking it. What's wrong with us?
They're both off the charts.
Okay.
You don't pick a fight with Russia. You don't pick a fight with China. To what end? To what end?
Well, I'm going to say you one that's even dumber. When the President of the United States deliberately lied about what happened in Benghazi, and rather than admit that Americans' weapons had been used and that Americans' intervention in Libya had created the scenario that led to the killing of our ambassador, and admitting that we had erred, he instead blamed the attack on a fundamentalist Christian. which he knew at the time was an absolute lie, and he continued to perpetrate the lie, and he actually changed the CIA evaluation of what happened there 12 times before he even began to speak about it. Now, when you realize that the United States has lost 10,000 of its sons and daughters in a war against fundamentalist Muslims, and that we have squandered $4 trillion of our treasure in 2 wars, both of which made bad situations worse against fundamentalist Muslims. And now you're lying on behalf of fundamentalist Muslims when it's obvious that what we're doing is wrong. That may be even more criminal, more risky, more insane than what he has done here with China and Russia. Would you put the 3 together? And the man ought to be impeached. Yeah, it's total insanity. But who are you going to replace him with?
He'll never be impeached. He won't be impeached because they own these guys.
Yeah.
But he does need to be recalled. He needs to be thrown out.
But who would you replace him with? You're going to replace him with Bonner? Did you hear Bonner go off and absolutely destroy his own credibility relative to the Tea Party yesterday?
As these people climb up the ladder, we know they get more and more corrupt, okay? That's the only way they can climb that ladder. I do have a question here for you. This came into my inbox. Question for Yada. And I don't know if you're up on this or not, but there was an Indian girl that was arrested, and she was actually strip searched in New York, and she was a diplomat. And she wanted to know what's your reaction to India's reaction of pulling security from our embassy over there.
So we had this happened in India or in the United States?
No, it happened in New York.
Okay, so in New York, someone who was assigned to the Indian, and this would be as in India in Asia, mission, their embassy in New York, was strip searched.
Oh yeah, she was arrested on December 12th after she dropped her daughter off at school. She wasn't handcuffed until she arrived at the courthouse. A law enforcement source familiar with the case told CNN, calling that a courtesy not afforded most people, including alleged white-collar criminals. Court papers allege that I don't know how to say her name.
It's a breach of international law.
She's 39. She was held to cell with other females and strip searched in New York following her arrest.
Well,
yeah.
You can't do that with embassy personnel.
I know
the only way you can do that with embassy personnel is that you would literally have to have credible witnesses see them perpetrate a heinous crime. And if you had witnesses see them perpetrate a heinous crime, which, by the way, dropping your daughter off at school doesn't qualify, although that it probably is a crime to send a child to an American school. No, you can't do that. And America has developed a reputation of being a rogue nation, of being the kind of nation that we used to condemn others. We used to be a nation with the rule of law that respected the rule of law, and that was a just and free nation. And we cried bloody murder when our embassies are in any way tampered with, even though most of our international CIA operatives operate out of American embassies.
Do you know what they're claiming they arrested this woman for?
No.
She claims that in the application for her visa, she would pay her housekeeper the minimum wage of $9.75 per hour, but in reality, prosecutors say the housekeeper ended up being paid the equivalent of $3.31 an hour.
Well, I'm going to tell you that if that is the truth, if that is what they did, then everyone associated with that arrest, including the judge that authorized it, ought to be repealed.
Well, this is right here. You know, it's on.
Yeah, that is. You know, if you were to look at politicians and empowered individuals and their housekeepers, you would find that the majority of them, not a minority of them, not a significant percentage of them, but the majority of them are violating one or more U.S. laws. You know, it's either they're probably not properly documented, they don't pay minimum wage, they don't provide benefits. There are so many laws that the government likes to impose on individuals that are impossible for the individual to pay any attention to. But the fact is, most American citizens don't want to do the job of housework, so it's mostly people who are illegal immigrants. But be that as it may, that they're complete hypocrites, you don't do this, particularly to a nation that we have deliberately abused. My big issue with this is that the United States is aiding and abetting the Pakistanis and vastly more supportive of the Pakistanis over the Indians. And in fact, we, for years, destroyed all diplomatic relations with India. And that's why I shared this story 2 days ago about the 400,000 women that in the 1970s the Pakistani army raped in the Bangladesh succession issue. And that for us then to take David Headley. Do you remember the David Headley story? David Headley was the Muslim that Dianne Feinstein said that the NSA eavesdropping had prevented from perpetrating a terrorist act. Well, David Headley was the fellow working for Pakistani intelligence and the CIA as a dual agent that was the mastermind of the Mumbai terrorist attack that killed over 200 Indians. And we knew, and in fact, James Clapper, the head of National Security for America now, knew and had absolute confirmation that he was planning those attacks, and yet we let them take place in India. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. One of the things that is important to understand is that we are headed to world war. Yahowah has been very clear about the wars that are going to be fought, and they are on the not-too-distant horizon. And it is fairly obvious in Yahowah, Isaiah 17 and 18, that the United States is going to initiate one of these wars, the first of them, and that the United States is going to be pummeled as a result of it. So what we're doing here is consistent with what Yahowah predicted would happen. And while God has predicted that it's going to happen, that doesn't mean that we should contribute to it. You know, prophecy isn't predestination. It's simply a report in our past of what we have done in our future. God exists as light, which means he can see yesterday, today, and tomorrow as if they were all now. That's the nature of light. Time simply exists on a photon of light. And therefore, he has witnessed the sum of our bad choices and has reported to us in our past what our bad choices lead to. And it's two wars. One is the Magog War, which is all Islamic, and the last war is is Asia, probably principally the Chinese, that are coming in to deal with the aftermath of the Magog War because of what it does to their oil and gas supplies.
Can I share the word that he uses in regards to us?
Yeah.
It's hoy. And hoy means, of course, as you know, woe.
Well, yes, correct.
And he says this. He says, woe to the land of whirling and buzzing armed wings, which is beyond the region, which is the region beyond the rivers of Cush. And Cush was northern Africa. It was as far west as they knew at that time. And he says it's further west than that. If you go directly west from there, you find the U.S. And what are we really known for? We're known for the helicopters.
Yeah. It talks about a land divided by rivers. We're the most divided land in the world in terms of massive rivers. It talks about our arrogance. It talks about us using vessels to project our influence around the world. It talks. In fact, there's 12 different adjectives. In fact, I've just started this past week of going back and retranslating Yahowah 17 and 18 because it applies to the United States. What it basically says is that this nation will
force Israel to give up land. That's
right. Well, it says it loots Israel at the waist, and we're doing that. We're the country that forced Israel to give up Gaza, and we're the country most effective in forcing Israel to give up Judea and Samaria, which is the high ground of the West Bank. And it says that as a result of doing that, just as giving up Czechoslovakia by Neville Chamberlain led to World War III, it indicates that doing that actually incites Muslims, and that rather than appeasing them, that Muslims come into America's largest cities and they destroy them. So that is the prophecy, and it is extraordinarily dire for the United States. And we're not all that far from this time. You know, we're just 13 years now from the beginning of the tribulation, probably 14 years from the Magog War, and we're the nation lighting the fuse. Just as Neville Chamberlain lit the fuse of World War II and what he did by giving up the high ground of Czechoslovakia to the Nazis, we're the nation most responsible for lighting the fuse. Now, one of the things that's really interesting, and the reason I haven't gotten to Yahowah 17 and 18 and the meat of it is that I was really fascinated by the fact that it opens with a mention of Damascus. And when I first when I first translated this passage, I really didn't understand why it would open up by a reference to Damascus, and now I found two reasons, and I'm beginning to articulate my thoughts on both of the two. One is because the Damascus prophecy is integral to the arrival of Yahowah in corporeal form, and I've just finished translating that prediction that ties Damascus and the fall of Damascus into the corporeal present arrival of the Messiah. And of course, he's going to arrive within a few years of the time that the Magog War occurs and Damascus falls. But there is something far bigger, Larry. And the bigger thing is, where right now is the primary catalyst for World War III? Where is it taking place? Where is the great jihad to establish the Islamic Caliphate?
Syria.
Damascus, right?
Damascus.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's where the war is being fought. That's where America almost started this war. Damascus. He told us.